Hi, welcome to the Armchair Commanders podcast. My name is Jon,
And I'm Jack.
and this week we are discussing George Clooney's The Monuments Men. And this week we are joined by a special guest. We have JD from the History Underground joining us. If you'd like to say hi, JD.
Hey, how's it going?
It's great to have you with us, and we appreciate you fitting us into your schedule.
Oh, thank you. I'm glad you guys invited me.
So right off the bat, I got to ask you. Our rule for the show is whenever we have a guest, um, we kick the choice of the film to them because they're coming on and spending their time with us. So I sent a pretty lengthy list to you, and I'm not upset by this movie choice by any stretch of the imagination. It's just of all the films that we had on the list, I can't really say I know when this one would have ever really come up or have been selected by myself or Jack.
Yeah.
So what about this? Yeah, Jack's been wanting to see it for a little bit, but it was a hefty list I sent you. So I'm just curious what about this film stuck out to you for the choice?
So, yeah, Monuments Men. I think it came out in 2014, if I'm not mistaken.
Mm-hmm.
And I honestly can't remember if I went and saw it in the theaters or not. My memory's a little bit hazy on that. But what I remember is it just got eviscerated by the critics. I think if you go on Rotten Tomatoes, the Monuments Men has like a 32 or a 34%. I mean, it just got.
We were going to find
slammed.
that out later. So
Oh,
That's a
It's all
part of
good.
our show is the Rotten Tomatoes score reveal and what we think of it. But
oh man, it's okay.
I
So
like
I revealed it too
I
early.
like your spirit.
no,
So-
I dig it. I dig it.
Yeah, it was gonna come out eventually.
So I looked, I watched the movie, and the reason I picked it is for some reason. Usually when the critic scores comes out, I can kind of go by that. And this is a movie that I think just got an unnecessary beating from the critics, and yeah, I just thought it'd be kind of an interesting one to chat about. I hadn't watched it in a little while, so it was a good opportunity for me to kind of go back and revisit it as well.
I think when you sent that to me, I thought I'm like this is an interesting choice because I did actually see this in theaters when it came out in 2013, 2014, whatever.
Mhm.
I do remember actually going to see it, and I haven't watched it since I saw it in theaters. And I didn't think it was at least from my recollection from prior to rewatching it for this episode, I never really, I didn't think it was a bad film at the time, or I didn't remember it being a bad film. I also think I didn't remember it as being like anything particularly special either.
Right.
So I I think I would agree that the 30% is kind of an unjust or a bit harsh of a reaction to this film.
I mean, I can remember movies that I went to and hated, like movies that I really hated, kind of stick with me. I can remember the feeling that I had when I walked out of the theater after watching Titanic, and the greatest tragedy was that was $7 or $8 that I was never going to get back. I hated that movie.
That's aged
I'm
well.
trying to think of some
That's a hot
others.
take. I think there's a lot of people that disagree with that.
Oh yeah, I'm probably in the minority on that, especially amongst all the girls who went and watched it like 5 or 6 times. They would definitely, um, you know, take issue with my assessment of Titanic. I think what was another one? Master and Commander. I fell asleep in the movie theater during that movie. So I don't know. Maybe I just caught it on a bad night. But with Monuments Men, again, I'm like you. I didn't walk out, thinking that this is a movie that has just changed my life. But I didn't have the visceral reaction to it that many people did.
No, that's fair. And as somebody who loved Master Commander, I can also see why someone could fall asleep during that film also. So
I went back and watched that one later, and it actually wasn't as bad. I think I just caught it on a bad night. I probably hadn't got enough sleep the night before, or something like that. Um,
it
but
also helps that if you know nothing about, the Age of Sail, it is a hard movie to follow.
yeah, yeah. Now, Jack, you hadn't seen the movie prior to the us bringing it up.
No, I'd never seen Monuments Men before today.
Okay. So I'm
So
just
Yeah,
kind of curious. What was your gut reaction to it? Your first take on it?
didn't hate it.
it's
It was weird that it
a
was
common
more
theme.
comedy.
Yeah.
It was weird seeing all this comedy in what was by its nature a war movie. But
Hmm.
I will say obviously um they got John Goodman and Bill Murray in it.
Matt
So
Damon.
yep, Matt Damon
Sorry, I
too.
have to.
Good old Team America reference. Can't pass it up.
Yep, that's been a running joke throughout our entire podcast so far.
It's our first Matt Damon film though.
Yeah, special occasion.
It is. But with this, you have two pretty big, comedic names in the movie. And I one thing I kind of found interesting is, despite the fact that you have Bill Murray and John Goodman in this film, is that there are scenes that you very obviously see, or there are lines that are given that are meant to be jokes, and you're supposed to laugh at them, but they really kind of fall flat.
Hmm.
Like, there's a ton of times where you're like, John Goodman says something that's supposed to be funny, and I'm like, huh. Like, it's like
Yeah.
the first, they're doing the training scene, and I love the fact that they got John Goodman to run an obstacle course for this movie. Just I could not imagine getting, at this time he would have been like 65 or something, but like 65, still 300 plus pounds, John Goodman, crawling underneath barbed wire. Like, that must have been a hard sell to him. But,
So
but
so
yeah,
that scene that you're talking about, um, I don't know, maybe for people who haven't seen the movie, the context of the whole film is that it's the middle of World War II, and Europe's greatest art treasures are being threatened, and it's all based on a true story. So
Hmm.
there's this. In reality, the movie only focuses on like 6 or 7 individuals. In reality, there was about 345 to 350 different people from different countries who were tasked with going to Europe and securing and protecting these pieces of art, some of which had been stolen, and some of which were in need of protection. I don't know. We can go off on a tangent and talk about a lot of different things with this. But the scene that you're talking about in particular, I really liked that scene where they take these middle aged guys, which in reality they were middle aged men, um, in their 40s or 50s or whatever, and they have to go through this basic training. And where you have John Goodman going under this barbed wire, and he's kind of just doing it, you know, not 100%. And then some of the other guys come up, and he stands up and just talks, and is kind of just shooting the bull with them. And I liked that scene because the stage in life that I'm at right now, there's a reason that the military recruits young guys. You,
yeah,
you can get you can get an 18, 19, 20-year-old guy to do things that a man in his 40s would be like, no, I ain't doing that.
yeah.
I don't have to do that, and I'm not going to do that. And so I liked that kind of nonchalant attitude in that scene.
I definitely feel that because in my regular life, I'm a first responder, and I've been doing that uh, for a pretty significant amount of time now. And there's a lot of different places that take in the first responder world that takes on the paramilitary style of training, where it's like,
Hmm.
we're going to make you do push-ups and yell at you and make you pay for simple mistakes for attention to detail and all that stuff. And like, it's like you said, when you're a young guy, it hits you hard and you take it seriously, and it leaves an impact on you. And like, I'm not an old guy by any stretch of the imagination at this point in my life, or at least I don't think I am.
Yeah.
I'm only 28, about to be 29. But
Okay.
even only being a few years removed from that, I look back on that and I'm like, God, that is so stupid. I would never do that again.
Yeah. So I mean, eh, I'm 43 right now, and if there was some situation where I don't know, maybe there's a machine gun nest that has to be taken out, and you tell some young 20-year-old guy, hey, we need you to charge this machine gun nest or do this, that, or the other. Yeah, maybe he'll go after it. You ask me to do that, I'd be like, nah. Let's think about this. um, yeah. So anyway, that element of it, I found you know pretty
I, I
entertaining.
I will say the thing about John Goodman though is that part that you were talking about. That was the first time I paused the movie, because every now and again I'll be watching these films and something just sticks out to me, and I'll be like, okay, I have to fact check this, or I have to just I have to see how close to reality this is. And in my brain, when I saw John Goodman doing this obstacle course, I'm like, there is no way that 65-year-old, 300-pound John Goodman is like a realistic recruit for the United States Army. And when I looked it up, it's actually not that far off from the truth. The oldest member of the Monuments Men was 66.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah,
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 at that
Yeah,
point,
no,
it's take what you can get.
yeah,
it
John.
was. It was. So when I read that, I'm like, great. Now I'm going to be pausing this movie every 5 minutes to fact check something that I think is going to be an obvious answer, because I'm like, how could I'm wrong about this? And I was like, this can't be true, and it turned out to be so. So I was like, God, this is my watching of it took a while
Yeah,
because
I
I
think.
kept pausing.
Yeah, John Goodman, his character in the movie, I think his name is Walter Garfield. So all of this is based on real people. There was a book by Robert Edsel called "The Greatest Treasure Hunt in History" that this movie was based off of. So they took the real people from World War II that participated in this, and basically built the story around them. So everybody that you see, whether it's Matt Damon's character or George Clooney's character or Bill Murray or John Goodman, they're all based on real people. Uh, John Goodman's character was based on a guy named Walter Hancock, and I think he was in his early 40s, if I remember right, when he was over in Europe, but he was a sculptor. And another thing that I wanted to a reason why I picked Monuments Men is there's a lot of crossover with some of the places that I've been on the channel, and some of the places with the Monuments Men. But he actually designed the World War One monument in St. Louis, which was one of the first videos that I did on the channel. But yeah, all of these people were based on real life figures, which is interesting to me. Now, the degree to which they get it right, I mean, they take a lot of artistic liberties with this movie.
that
Uh,
it's I don't know if that was purposeful, but that was a good play on words for this movie.
yeah, but each artistic liberty is you can follow it, the thread back to something that actually happened in real life.
I I did appreciate that. Like there was a lot of veins of truth in this movie, but it was
Mhm.
definitely you know how a lot of movies will start off with based on a true story or what have you. I always get a little irked by those opening statements because, and
Yeah.
granted, it's pedantic with a one or two word change in what uh, you decide to describe.
Mhm.
But I think this movie definitely fits the mold of inspired by true stories as opposed
Yeah.
to based on true events.
Yeah.
Um, but it's a tiny little thing that probably isn't that big of a deal to most people.
Right. Right. Um, yeah. So yeah, I think that's a good way to put it. That it's inspired by true events. Like Kate Blanchett's character in the movie, they give her the name Claire Simone, but she was based on a figure named Rose. I think you pronounce her name Valland. I'm really terrible at French. Um,
Well, that's better than any attempt I could ever come up with. So
Yeah, props given.
but yeah, she was I mean a real life art historian at this museum in Paris and did some incredible work. Now where the movie kind of goes sideways is where they try and introduce a little bit of romantic tension between her and Matt Damon's character. Um, that never happened. But she did some incredible work at the museum that she was working at, and the name escapes me right now. Um, the Jeu de Paume, that's the name of it.
Ah,
Yeah, she was working at the Jeu de Paume, which served as a kind of like a sorting house for all of this plundered art that the Nazis had during World War II. Um, and like at the very beginning of the movie, they show Hermann Goering, who was like the biggest art thief in the Third Reich, visiting there. He had made, I think, over 20 visits to the Jeu de
yep.
Paume, and was picking out works of art for himself, and then everything else was going to go to the Fuhrer Museum in Linz, Austria, which was going to be like this the biggest art museum
yeah, because
in Europe.
didn't Hitler, he, as a part of his, he wanted to have a giant, he basically wanted a Napoleon style mausoleum type deal,
Hmm.
but also wanted it to be the world's largest art museum at the same time because he wanted to, you know, you know, stick his tongue out at the art school who that rejected him.
Have you ever seen any of Hitler's art?
Yeah,
I have. It's
it's not bad.
genuinely good. I mean,
It's not bad.
I
It's
I
better
remember.
mean,
than anything I could do.
oh,
Um,
absolutely. I
yeah,
I mean,
I,
for myself, that is. I'm not an artist by any stretch of the imagination, but
yeah,
I
neither am
wouldn't
I.
like he's no Rembrandt, obviously, but I as in like the if you Google Adolf Hitler art,
I
it's pretty decent,
yeah,
or
Yeah,
it's good enough
it's
for the time, his contemporaries at the time.
like
yeah.
it's stuff I would hang in my bathroom, but not necessarily my living room. But I remember hearing this story about how they unearthed one of his fucking lost paintings, and they asked a critic without telling him who it was written by or who it was drawn by what he thought.
Mhm.
And he said it's a remarkably beautiful painting, but his attention to detail and humanity lacks, as if he's suffering from a distinct lack of empathy.
Oh, interesting. I've never
I
heard that.
I remember in college I took a class. It was called Mass Murderers and Serial Killers, which uh,
Sounds like a morbid
a
class.
it was a very morbid class, but I feel very lucky because I feel like that's not a class that is offered at many universities. Um, but with a title like that, you almost have to take it
Yeah,
because you're
I
you
would.
know there's a reason why investigative discovery is its own channel, and there's a reason why Netflix has 40 billion true crime documentaries.
Mhm.
um, but on the first day of the class, that's actually it was kind of the interesting thing was our teacher handed us a packet, and it was a psychological profile, no name to it, just here are the psychological elements to this person, and one of the things it listed was this person enjoys painting, and
Oh.
we have this
Hmm.
packet of here are the psychological indicators of this person, and then after we read the packet, we're like, okay, take a guess as to what this person's crime is or was, things that may have impacted this, all that kind of stuff. Just gauging our ability to guess with given information. And the psychological packet we were given was for Adolf Hitler, and they're
Mhm.
like, it's like, who here had the you know worst mass murderer in all of human history for their answer, and like nobody raised their hand. We're like, oh, we're bad at this.
I mean, the painting thing would have given it away, at least on some level.
John Wayne Gacy enjoyed painting too.
And I was gonna bring that up. Like, it's shocking to me how normal or outwardly normal most of these people were. Like, John Wayne Gacy held block parties and sponsored people, and like he was a prominent member in the some it was an organization like the Shriners, but I can't remember what it was called. And
Something like
like
an Elks Club or
uh,
Oddfellows or something.
something like that. And like he would entertain children and like take pictures with people's kids. He got a picture with the first lady at the time after going through multiple security checkpoints through the Secret Service. And like if you were to plop if I knew nothing about Hitler and you were to plop his history and mental profile in front of me, I probably wouldn't think anything of it. War hero, injured during his service, likes painting, doesn't drink, doesn't like eating meat. I would never guess.
Yeah. So the real question is there some, if we were to place bets on all of the classical artists of like the Renaissance, who do you think was the serial
Serial
killer?
killer.
Yeah. Do you think it was Da
Da
Vinci or
Vinci.
Michelangelo?
Da Vinci. Oh man, he had to have
He
gotten those anatomical drawings from somewhere.
Yeah, he was into dissection, so I'm sure there's got to be a little bit of overlap, but slightly off topic there. um I will say, kind of going back to the comedy falling flat was, with this being an inspired by more or
Mhm.
less story. I don't know if you guys felt this way, but during certain action sequences, I'm like, this is kind of unnecessary. Like the scene where Kate Blanchett's character rides her bicycle to the train station and sees the one Nazi guy hop on the train, and she's like, I know he's got the paintings, and he just like looks
Uh-oh.
back and
And then
starts
like
shooting at her with his
like
pistol. I'm like, this is completely unnecessary.
like he
You
lazily pops off his entire clip. Notice that he didn't hit her, and he's like, whatever.
Yeah, well, it's like you're a high ranking Nazi official. You don't have to care one bit about her opinion. Like, why are you like? It seemed like drama for the sake of drama.
Yes.
Yeah, and I think unfortunately they insert that in a lot of different places in the movie, and like you said, it falls flat. Now again, I don't have the visceral hatred of the movie like many of the critics did, um, but at the same time, there's probably um, it's a missed opportunity as well. Um, there, yeah, there are just elements that just didn't work in the movie, but it's one that I can put on and watch with my kids. I'm not going to rank it as the one of my top 10 movies of all time, um, but it tells a story that most people were probably unaware of prior to the movie coming out.
Absolutely. I think that's also one of the things, like this movie not only does a great job of bringing up a story that is barely touched on, if at all. I think the only time we really get the fact that art theft was a thing in the war brought up at all is um, in Holocaust movies like Defiance or
Mhm.
Schindler's List. We see it there because obviously that is a part of the story of the Jewish people, um, you know, being deported to camps, having all their possessions rounded up and stuff like that. We get it there, but I think that is one of the unfortunate things about World War II films or just World War II as a subject is that even though the Holocaust is intimately intertwined with the story of World War II, I think a lot of times as historians or just as people of the general public, we often hold them in kind of like two different two different places in our brain
Mhm.
where we acknowledge that the Holocaust exists at the same time as World War II and within it, but when we think about the landings of Normandy, we're not thinking at the exact same time that, guys are storming the beaches. There are, thousands of people dying every single day in these concentration camps. It's a hard thing to keep intertwined together.
Yeah, that's one of the unfortunate things with the study of World War II history, or one of the things that you can kind of slip into is that people tend to silo the history. So I know some people who just focus solely on the European theater, and completely ignore the fact that, I mean, there's another war that's going on in the Pacific at this time. And yeah, while the Allies are coming ashore, at Normandy, there's fighting that's going on down in Italy. There are the camps, the slaughter in the camps is really ramping up at that time. Um, so yeah, I think the more that we can kind of give context and intertwine those things instead of keeping them siloed, I think we um, are better served by doing that. And the movie, it touches on some of those things, kind of bringing um, that intertwined nature, into the film. There's one scene where they go to the home of one of these. I think it was an SS guy, but um, one of these Nazis, and he's in plain clothes and he's there with his family, and he's got this art that's up on the wall,
Yeah.
and they ask him, "Have you ever heard of the Rothschilds?" And he's like, "Oh no, I've never heard of them." Well, that was one of the largest art collectors in Europe at the time. He was a Jewish family, and then when they're in the mine in Merkers, I believe it's Matt Damon's character picks up something and makes mention of the fact that it's gold teeth, which is you know rooted in reality. In the
Hmm.
Merkers mine, um, it wasn't just art that they had in there, um, but like the Reich's treasury had moved all of their gold there, and um, all these looted possessions from Jewish individuals was there, and then also, yeah, gold teeth that had been extracted from these Jewish individuals.
I will say that scene you're talking about, I'm pretty sure it wasn't intended to be taken this way, but the scene where they're talking to the guy who's pretending to not be a Nazi with all of
Hmm.
his stolen art on the walls, that
Yeah.
is one scene that I did have I genuinely laughed and had like, oh, this is a
Yeah.
funny moment. Because at the end of that scene, the way they close it out is one of the monuments men looks over to the kids who are playing in the living room, and he just like glances over to them and he nonchalantly says Heil Hitler, and
Yeah.
both the kids immediately like
Drop what they're
snapped.
doing.
They drop what they're doing, they snap to, and they both yell Heil Hitler, and they're like that's not meant to be a funny scene, but it is because of how clever they were able to wrap up that particular moment in this movie.
Yeah.
And it's like, haha, we got you,
And
So
yeah, there's that awkward moment beforehand where that really old dude was just like looking at the paintings. He's like, "Wow, these are really good," and the guy was like, "Ah, no, they're just copies."
Yeah.
And then he's like, "You do realize he signed the back of these paintings, right? And I just saw them." And then he like has that coy laugh. Then he looks over and John Goodman has a gun on the table.
Was it John Goodman or was it Bill Murray in that scene?
Bill Murray.
Oh, it was Bill Murray that had the
Yeah.
gun on the table, and then the next scene they're driving off with the dude in tow with all the paintings in the back.
So we've mentioned the interjection of humor into this movie a few different times now, and I think that was one thing that was kind of off-putting to a lot of people. Is they took this war movie and it almost turns into like an Ocean's 11 type movie or a buddy comedy.
Well, literally, because
thing.
we have two of Ocean's 11 here.
Yeah.
We have Mr. Ocean himself, actually.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, he was the one that put on this art heist.
To me, what it feels like. Now, I can't speak for George Clooney or the producers or anything like that, so I've not read anything that would support this. What the movie feels like is that it's trying to do a little bit of a throwback to some of those movies like in the 40s and 50s, maybe into the 60s, almost like a Casablanca type thing. Where if you watch Casablanca, I mean that's a war movie that was produced during the war, but there's all these little one-liners and little interjections of humor and quips and things like that. I don't know. Maybe I'm off on that, but that's what the movie felt like to me. That it was trying to, have a nostalgic feel to it.
I can definitely see that. The thing that frustrated me about it, though, is, we talked about the moments that did fall flat, but then this is a scene where it feels real. Like this is a scene that felt genuine, and the end result was not meant to get a laugh, but it did. And it shows that you can have humorous moments in serious situations if presented. It like war is terrible, but human beings are remarkable in the fact that we can find humor in even the most terrible of things.
Mm-hmm.
And it just goes to show that they could have had those humorous moments without it being deadpan,
Yeah.
But the other part of this that, talking about the other part that you brought up, which was the gold teeth scene where, Matt Damon, basically he dumps his hand into this giant barrel and like, it looks kind of like as if he's, like sifting through sand almost, but it's gold instead.
Yeah, once you get a good look at it,
it is a moment that, obviously art theft was a huge part of World War II, and art theft was a huge part of the Holocaust also.
Mm-hmm.
And this movie never shies away from talking about the Holocaust. They, it's at the forefront of the story that this is going on, and it's part of it. But I think a way that they could have reframed that scene or made that scene more powerful is if we actually saw a camp. Because when I saw that scene, I could tell this is a scene that they have purposely shot and they have put in this movie that is supposed to make us have a strong emotion. It is supposed to remind us that, for every one of these tiny little, flecks of gold is a human being that isn't here anymore. And this movie, it doesn't have any problem interjecting our characters in literally every other part of the European theater, because we see them land on the beaches of Normandy. You have a pair that goes to like Belgium. We even have a scene where they're spending Christmas in Bastogne.
Yeah.
This movie has already proven the fact that it doesn't care about injecting our characters into any given place as long as it helps whatever story they're putting. I think something that would have made this infinitely more powerful is if we had a scene where the Monuments Men were there when a camp was found. And we see on the screen, we actually see them understand the weight of what is happening here. Because prior to the camps being found, obviously your your average soldier and officers and all that stuff, they know that a lot of people, and especially the Jewish people, have been persecuted in Europe up to this point. But there's a lot of guys who don't know how absolutely awful it is until the camps are actually getting found. And there's the whole that's the whole reason why when the camps were found, Eisenhower made it an order that if you're in any amount of proximity to one of these camps, you will go see it, because he didn't want anybody to say this wasn't a thing, or they didn't want anybody to not understand what was going on. So I feel like if we had a scene where the Monuments Men were there when a camp was found, and then we followed it up with the scene of they're in a cave and they find one of these barrels, and then they have these are fillings from people's teeth. I think that would have skyrocketed the impact of that moment in the movie.
Yeah, I'd be curious to know if any of the, I mean, again, there were 345, 350 of these people who served, as the Monuments Men. I'd be curious to know if any of them ever um, visited any of the camps as they were moving through. I mean, because obviously these aren't frontline guys, but as you mentioned, they did have soldiers come in and bear witness to what had happened at these camps. Um, yeah, so yeah, that's interesting to me. They would have had to have really um, been strategic about how they tackled that in the movie to make it look like it's not shoehorned in there.
Oh,
Um,
absolutely.
yeah, so but yeah, if they could have worked it, that'd be interesting.
I think it was a missed opportunity.
Yeah,
Is my thing.
yeah,
But you mentioned this is a movie that you can sit down and you can watch it with your kids, you can watch it with your family.
right.
I would say we've the last couple of reviews we've done, one of my biggest complaints has been that when they made the movie, they shot for not an appropriate rating.
Hmm.
Last week we did Gettysburg, and that got rated PG, and I was like, we can't have one of the most significant battles in the American Civil War as a PG film. I'm sorry, it's not going to. It
Yeah,
doesn't really do it justice. The same way that when we reviewed the Alamo, it was a PG-13 movie, and I'm like, if this was a rated R film, I think 2004's Alamo would have been, just that would have really hit the mark.
yeah,
This is one of those few times that I think the film was rated correctly. Like, this was not meant to be this topic, at least it was not meant to be a shoot 'em up action packed film.
right,
Its objective was not to. There are the horrors of war in this movie, but it's not the primary focus of it. The
right,
primary focus of it is the Allies are trying to preserve this part of human heritage. So in that sense, this film being a PG-13 film, I'm totally cool with that, because the primary subject matter of it is the recovery of this stolen art, and the set piece is World War II, as opposed to these other films are, this is a story about this battle, or this is a story about this war. So I will say this is the one time I'm not going to be mad about a horror movie being a PG-13 film.
yeah, and I'm with you there. You mentioned Gettysburg as an example, which I think that was originally supposed to Well, I better not say that. I was getting ready to say I think it was supposed to be a made-for-TV movie, and then they ended up making it bigger. But I could be wrong about that. But yeah, the bottom line is it is far too sanitized. But so in general, whether it's Civil War, World War One, World War Two, I prefer a more dark, gritty version uh, of the depiction of the events. That would not have worked for this movie because that's not the story that they were telling. Um, and I like that again. I like that it's a movie that I can watch with my family, and then can have some conversations about World War II and different things like that. Um, and also that it tells a story that most people wouldn't know. Here's one thing about the movie that I kind of like, and maybe I'm getting into too deep a thought here. Uh, is I think that it begs the question of what our values are in a time of war. So if you look at the Abbey at Monte Cassino, so this is this abbey that has its roots all the way back in like the 500s. And the long story short, the Allies suspect that the Germans are using it for artillery observation. Um, there were some monks there that said, no, there's nobody here. There were just civilians in there and some monks. But they still believe that the Germans were utilizing this place. So I think February 15th, 1944, they send in B-17s and B-25s and bomb this historic structure and reduce it to rubble. Um, and I mean, it's been rebuilt, but essentially we lost it because of that. So it makes me think, you know, let's say it's an old church that was built in the 1500s, and that there's a German artillery observer in the bell tower. Um, what do you do? Like, what decision do you make there? Do you destroy this historic structure um, in order to take out the artillery observer, or do you preserve it? So that must have been a difficult question for these guys as they were kind of moving through Europe. What do we destroy and what do we save? Um, given the situation.
I believe
Yeah.
I believe what Eisenhower, because it was a directive from Eisenhower, his what it got boiled down to was necessity versus convenience. And you mentioned Monte Cassino. That was the first major test of the necessity convenience line,
Hmm.
because it was right before that battle he came out with this directive, and it's because of this directive that Monte Cassino ended up being one of the most bloody battles of the Italian campaign. Is because when he came out with this directive, there was a lot of officers who were like, "We don't know who's going to be the first one to test the line on this directive," and it ended up getting a lot of casualties because of it. But there was that momentary hesitation that they had about, okay, let's not destroy it. But um, it's the question they pose at the beginning of this film: is any one piece of art worth a human life?
Yeah, I
Uh,
mean, and that I don't mean to sound callous when I say this, but that's a difficult question.
It is.
Um, I mean, one of the pieces that was at risk, and they ended up building like sandbags around it and everything like that and preserved it, was the Last Supper.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so if it's between the Last Supper and some guy from Cleveland, I mean, what do you do? Um, you know,
Depends. Is the guy from Cleveland an asshole or?
well, yeah, he. So I mean, being just real, he means something to
Yeah,
somebody.
yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
It's a human life that has value and worth and was created in the image of God, is that life more important than this timeless piece of art? Um, I mean, I'm not falling on either side of the fence here. I think it's just a an interesting moral dilemma to have to, you know, put yourself in the shoes of those guys.
Absolutely. I mean, war it's a series of decisions and sacrifice, and it's what sacrifices are and are not acceptable to you.
Yeah.
And if I was a sergeant in World War II and there's a sniper in the bell tower and some guy told me I couldn't destroy it and potentially save my men, I'd tell him to go fuck himself. But
Yeah, it's
In that
uh,
moment, yeah.
absolutely. But then you also have somebody who's on the flip side of the coin. Take like you take somebody who's like a part of the Monuments Men who they've devote, George Clooney's character that he plays was a real individual. I forgot the name of him, but um, he spent his entire life devoted to art restoration. Actually, at the beginning of the war, one of the first things he did was he came out with pamphlets and distributed them to pretty much every museum that he could in the United States and in England. And it was here's the proper way to pack your art so it doesn't get, destroyed in bombings, basically.
Yeah.
Um, to
Yeah. George
him,
Stout was
the
his name.
yeah, to a person like him, the obverse is true, where it's like, for his perspective, this piece of art is more than oil and canvas. It is quite literally the essence of, a particular group's heritage or their
Mm-hmm.
history, or, you know, it's a more kind of more of a meta view of it, if you will. But, everybody has a different opinion, and, they're tough choices to be made. For my part, I think something to take into consideration is like, I do appreciate art. I'm not an art snob or an art nerd by any means, but I do appreciate it.
Mm-hmm.
And the first time I ever had one of these moments is I went to New York 2 years ago, I think. I went there for I got to participate in the 20th anniversary event for the 9/11 attacks in the
Mm.
city. And while we were in New York, obviously, aside from going to the World Trade Center and doing that stuff, hit up all the other attractions the city has to offer, because it's the first time I'd been to New York. And one of the places we went to was the MoMA, or the Museum of Modern Art. And in the MoMA, they have Van Gogh's Starry Night, which is probably one of the top 10 most recognizable paintings in human history. Um, Even somebody who knows nothing about art, if you were to say the name of that painting, they would know what you're talking about. Um, and, this is a painting that I had seen images of all the time. Like, my next door neighbor in college had a poster of it in their dorm. Like, it's that popular.
Yeah.
And I thought it was an interesting painting. I liked it, but also I didn't really think anything of it. I wasn't like, oh my God, this is a masterpiece. But going to this museum and actually seeing Starry Night in person drastically changed how I felt and viewed that particular work of art. Because when you actually get to see the real thing in person, you I don't want it to sound all hippy dippy, but you get to, you more or less, you feel it. You
Yeah.
get its actual impact, and you're more likely to get its importance once you've actually experienced it. So I can definitely see, you know, it just goes to it's a difficult choice balancing what we're willing to sacrifice.
Right. Right. Well, and I mean, maybe kind of coming full circle on this. We're indebted to these 345, 350 men and women who played their part and served and fulfilled a role that you wouldn't think of. There are monuments men who still exist today in the military, um, in the war in Iraq. There was a, it's kind of lesser known, just kind of like monuments men in World War II were lesser known. But there was a conscious effort to be looking at these historic works in Iraq as the coalition forces were moving through. Um, so anyway, yeah, that's
Yeah,
that's
I
kind of
could.
why I like the movie. It's
I
just
I couldn't imagine being the guy who's trying to tell some tank commander, no, you can't destroy that. That wall's been there since the time of Babylon. And
yeah,
they're like, and?
yeah, yep. Um, which again, you're dealing with 18, 19, and 20-year-old guys in that case, who would maybe later in life maybe have a little bit different perspective. But yeah,
Right.
again, difficult choices, and these people did a great work, and um, I'm thankful that even though it kind of flopped and got eviscerated by the critics, I'm glad that the movie exists.
Me too.
I
It
am as
serves as a
well.
nice reminder.
And again, I brought this up in in a previous episode we did that Bill Murray was a character in. Last time we had Bill Murray in a movie that we reviewed was The Greatest Beer Run Ever, and he was a bartender in that movie. Um, but every time I see Bill Murray in a movie, it always makes me think. I don't know if you're familiar. The last time I brought it up in an episode, the way he accepts film roles is absolutely ridiculous. Um, and I don't know if you're familiar with it at all, but I've since done more research on it. And apparently, the way he accepts film roles is he doesn't have an agent or anybody that you go through. He has a 1-800 number. And the 1-800 number goes directly to a voicemail, which he may or may not check. And the frequency at which he checks is who knows. And essentially, you have to give a pitch of your movie to this voicemail. So you have a minute or 2 minutes to describe your film. He then listens to the voicemail or doesn't, who knows. And if he likes the idea for the film, he will then give you like a fax or an email or whatever to send the script to. And the script can't be more than like 90 pages. Because if it's more than 90 pages, he won't read it. And there's other factors in it too, but apparently he has like a checklist of things that the script has to accomplish for him to accept it. um but then after you've met all of these check marks, he's gotten to a point in his life where he doesn't really care about money.
Yeah.
So you have to bribe him with some sort of fun experience or something that tickles his fancy. So like, I think there was some sort of aquatic movie. It might have been Steve Zissou Life Aquatic. I can't remember. Anyways, there was a movie that involved a submarine, and the producers of that film promised him, "You can live on this submarine for a week." And he's like, "Okay."
I
So
really hope that those aren't urban legends and that those are real stories that actually happened, because that would be awesome.
at the very least, the 1-800 number is a true thing.
Oh, that's
After that
awesome.
point, I'm sure that there's some variations in legend to it, but every time we get
The,
a movie with Bill Murray now, I do the mental gymnastics of what was going through his mind when this came across, like when he heard the pitch and then he's like, yeah, sure, send me the script, and he read, I'm going to be in a movie about recovering stolen art. That he was like, yep, that is for me.
that's awesome.
Oh, he actually got to keep some of the Nazi artwork they actually recovered. Yeah,
Wait,
he drives a hard bargain.
He gets to keep one of the burnt Picassos.
And yeah, before we started this, I was actually looking up the artwork we lost in World War II, whether it was intentionally destroyed or just no one's seen it since, and we don't
Oh,
know
it's
where it went off
significant.
to. Joseph Brandt, a hunting trip, bunch of people on wagons waving guns about. Towards the end of the war, the cultural heritage stored in the vegetables. It was transferred to local monasteries and palaces. Their future fate remains unknown. Destroyed or stolen by German soldiers. Taken, no idea where it is. Making efforts to find it since 2004. And I was just wondering how many of these pieces are just in some random German guy's attic since the
I
war that he's inherited from his grandfather.
I'm glad you asked. I actually, in looking up stuff for this film, there was one story I came across, and I hope you guys don't mind a tangent, but
Nope.
this is a ridiculous story. Um, so have either of you heard of the Nemi ships?
The what?
No.
The Nemi ships. So
No
in
idea.
in Italy, there is a place called Lake Nemi, hence Nemi ships. So during the time of the Roman Empire, when Caligula was the emperor, he commissioned for essentially they were palaces, but they were these two massive, and I mean giant ships, especially by ancient standards. These are huge ships. He commissioned two of these giant ships that were supposed to be floating palaces on Lake Nemi. And, um, you know, obviously Caligula did not remain in power all that long. And after he was deposed, his ships got sent to the bottom of the lake. Um, and years, you know, a long time after the fact, it was actually these ships were always known to have been there, and in fact it was a common practice for local fishermen to like send a rope with a hook on the end of it like overboard and just like yank up planks of the ship and sell them to tourists.
Interesting.
Yeah, I
Oh,
mean,
wait. I think I've heard this story, but continue.
um so when Mussolini came to power, uh you know, I don't want to say great minds, what's the birds of a feather, there we go, that's a better
There we
one.
go. Better. You didn't
I
get
didn't want
canceled today.
I didn't want to say great minds think alike. Birds of a feather. Anyway, Mussolini also really big into not necessarily the Aryan idea of supremacy, but was very big on the like the cultural history of Italy, being like, look how much we've contributed to the world, or like look how advanced we were. He funded probably one of the most impressive archaeological recoveries of the 20th century, where he got archaeologists, engineers, all this stuff. He essentially cut a tunnel through a mountain so he could drain this giant lake, like completely dry, and then excavated the Nemi ships. Right, you know, didn't raise them up, you know, because obviously the lake wasn't a lake anymore, but recovered these ships and then moved them into this giant facility that was supposed to be a museum, and it was supposed to be like, look at our ancient ancestors magnificent, you know, technological achievements. And you can look it up, that they are very impressive ships, and I'm surprised that they were even able to keep them intact as much as they did. Well, World War II happened, and as with many things in World War II, the Nemi ships were one of the things that was lost, and was actually, you know, part of the reason why the Monuments Men became a thing, because there's also an incident in North Africa where the British destroyed some ancient ruins that really did a number on their PR manager.
Yeah, I think it was
Um,
in Libya.
Yeah, they so that happened, and then uh, it's debated, but I'm going to go. It's a pretty solid chance that the Allies were the ones that destroyed the Nemi ships. Anyways, Nemi ships are destroyed to the point that all that are left are fragments, and um, to this day, the Italians still have a museum where they made replicas of they're like half scale or 3/4 scale, but they made replicas of not even the ships themselves. They made replicas of the shipwreck. So it's like, look what we used to have. Um, but there's a the reason I bring this up is because I actually remember reading this in college. There was an incident in 2017 where a person in New York City had bought one of the fragments of the Nemi ships in an illicit manner, not a like, oh, this was a war trophy passed down to me. No, like it was like a black market auction type situation. And they were using it as a coffee table.
Yep, I did hear about this.
Wow.
And it just goes to show, like, we think about this event as being so long ago, and you know the these things that we consider to be lost, there a lot of these things that we consider to be lost are out there floating in the ether. It's like Jack said, it's in some dude's grandfather's attic, it's some rich person's coffee table.
Yeah.
It's truly astounding, all of these cultural heritage items that we have lost that could be made available again if just some people would do the right thing.
Yeah.
And I'm glad you mentioned that, because one of the other things that I like is just researching lost media and lost pieces of art. That's why I was looking forward to this, and why I wanted to see that, or wanted to do this in the first place. And I encourage you both to check out the Lost Media Wiki if you haven't already. There's some good stuff. One of the things I learned is that you guys know the iconic Washington crossing the Delaware painting, right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I'm actually before you continue with that side note, that's my next tattoo is I'm getting Washington crossing the Delaware on my forearm. So continue.
But anyway, apparently the one we have in Washington is just a copy. The real version was bombed to bits in Bremen during World War II.
In Bremen, what was it doing in Bremen?
That is a very good question that I do not have a good answer for.
Wow.
What I think happened was it was an exchange program between museums, because they do that. And this was
that's a
back
hard
when
loss.
this was back when the Germans ain't gonna do anything. We taught them their lesson in World War One. Yeah, it's fine.
Oh God.
And yeah, and that painting that they were looking for, the Picasso, that really was destroyed because the Nazis are sore losers.
Yeah, if there's anything we've learned over history is the Nazis don't like to lose.
Well, what a lot of that stuff was destroyed at their peak. So there was some stuff from Salvador Dali, some stuff from Picasso. There was a lot of art pieces that were destroyed because it was considered degenerate art. So they wanted to like wipe this stuff from the face of the earth, and yeah, have the what they consider to be the good classical art in the museum. You know, in what they considered the cradle of civilization.
That's just another feather in the cap for why Nazis are bad.
Yeah.
Another feather. It's a
As if
cap
they
with
needed
many
one.
feathers.
Like
Yeah.
they really needed help with that, but I like to take a small little reprieve in the middle of the show before we continue on with our topics. I know I had mentioned it to you in our message, but we usually have some sort of beverage that we like to chat about that isn't our sponsor at all. Jack, what are you drinking tonight?
I'm glad you asked. I went to the liquor store earlier and got a bottle of Menage a Trois, Cabernet Sauvignon. I felt
That's very
it.
that's very fancy for a bottom shelf wine, but I
Hey,
appreciate the
shut
effort.
up. Um, oh yeah, when I was at the liquor store, there was another guy trying to buy a 30 rack of Keystone, but because of supply issues, the dude didn't have it. And I just turned to him and said, "Jesus Christ, you don't have French wine and you don't have Keystone. You don't have any of the top shelf stuff." And he thought that was pretty funny. But yeah, I tried to find some French wine to go along with this, but he just doesn't have it.
Well, I imagine South Dakota is hardly the
Shut up.
epicenter of fine French wines.
Shut up. But yeah, you're right. So yeah, I'm drinking some wine because this is a European movie and a French movie. Also, I actually continue with the drinks talk.
Oh, I was going to say, JD, do you have anything you're drinking tonight, or you
Uh,
keeping it simple?
I'm drinking a blue raspberry body armor
You know what?
that I picked up at the gas station on the way here.
You know what? Hydration is important.
Yes,
I'm surprised. Are you still a partner with Origin?
yes.
I'm surprised you didn't do like a Raid Shadow Legends. Like, I'm drinking Jocko Go.
I do drink those often, but yeah, it's the old body armor this evening.
Oh, fair enough. I ordered a case of Jocko Go a while back, and I wasn't entirely smart about it. I went off the tried and true, like, oh, this is the color of the can, so red must taste tropical.
Oh,
And
nope.
apparently, no, it's not. It's like coconut something.
Yeah,
Um,
it's kind of like
it
a
wasn't it wasn't bad, but when you're expecting fruit punch and then you get coconut,
it's a shock.
yeah, it throws you through a loop. So since then, I've learned that when I order any of Jocko's products to actually read the label and not just go off the pretty pictures.
Yeah, the pink lemonade is probably my favorite, um, and the sour apple. Those are both my favorite flavors of the old Jocko Go.
Which I will say, Jocko is not a sponsor of the show, but he is a sponsor of JD's. So
Hint,
at
hint.
the end of the show, if you want to give your code for the Jocko products, have at it.
Yeah, there you go. History 10. Get you 10% off.
There you go. It's almost like having a sponsor, but not really for us, anyways. It's a running joke we have is obviously we've only just begun, so we don't have anybody throwing money at us yet. So um, every week we throw it out there that we're more than willing to take people's money, but nobody's reached out to us yet, which is a shame. But
I'll give it time.
yeah, but for me tonight, I'm actually very fortunate. There's a microbrewery out on the East Coast called Hackensack Brewing Company. Um, I was able to acquire one of their IPAs, and it's called. For the folks at home, you can't see it, but I'm showing it to JD and Jack. It's called Musket Haze, and
Hmm.
I got it because we're in the time frame of Fourth of July, so it has a
Dude,
very
I like
beautiful.
that can is cool.
It is.
I wish people could see this.
I'll put a picture of it up on our Instagram, but they partnered with an artist. I believe it's. You know what? I'm not even going to attempt to say his name because I'll probably screw it up. I will also share that to our Instagram. The artist that they partnered with to do the label for the can, but it's a beautiful painting of some revolutionary militiamen fighting some redcoats. But he does a bunch of other paintings. He does a lot of commission work. Also, I've been following him for a long time. So yeah, I will share both the can because it's a good looking can, and I will also share that artist because art is good.
Yeah, that thing's cool.
But yeah, I'm drinking Musket Haze IPA today. So I know this is circling way back, but what did we think about the portrayal of, it was only a moment, but I what did we think about the portrayal of Herman Goring in this film?
Uh, uh, it's bad.
I mean,
his uniform is a mess. Um, yeah, that was, um, yeah, that was something that really
One,
kind of took me out of the moment. Is when they had Goering, looking at the art. I was like, oh, that was actually a
I
pretty
find it
bad.
interesting because as you look at films over the different decades, Herman Goring has been portrayed in honestly kind of a wide range of ways. Like
Mhm.
it's, you know, like Hitler is generally portrayed almost relatively within the same body type and image. Like they usually are able to find actors that are approximately close to what he looked like, but Herman Goring in film is you get a lot of variation to it.
Yeah.
Um, and I would agree with you. The uniform was silly in this instance, but um, the thing I truly appreciate, and I'm not here to fat shame, but I really love the fact that they made Herman Goring fat in this film. Um,
mm-hmm.
because one, piss on him, and two,
Yeah.
one of my favorite stories from World War II is actually, um, I forgot the title of the book, but it's by Alex Kershaw, and one of his books that he wrote was about the American Volunteer Squadron that flew for the British during the Battle of Britain.
Oh, okay.
Anyways, there's a side story in that book that talks about at the time of Battle of Britain, they were moving up from one model of the ME 109 to the next, and they were basically doing, showing it off to Hermann Goring because he's the leader of the Luftwaffe,
Yeah.
and so they are showing off the newest model of the ME 109 to Goering, and he was a World War One ace and was a pilot himself, but by the time World War II happened, he was a very very large individual. And my favorite my favorite thing of all time in reading this book, and it's one of my top 5 stories of World War II, is they're like, "Hey, you want to hop into the cockpit?" And he's like, "Sure." And so and I don't know if anybody's ever seen a 109 in person, but it is, as far as fighter planes go, it is a small fighter plane. It is small. And so he hops up on the wing and he, climbs on into the cockpit and he lowers himself down, and it's literally like, fat man in a little coat syndrome. He couldn't lower himself below the waist level into this fighter plane. And apparently it was supposed to be like a super embarrassing moment for him because, here's this guy who was an ace of the First World War and head of the Luftwaffe and can't even fit into an airplane.
I guess it had been last October. Um, I had a chance to go to Berchtesgaden down in Bavaria with Eric Dorr from the Gettysburg Museum of History, and we were filming a whole bunch of content down there. But it was an incomplete train tunnel that was right there, very close to the train station in Berchtesgaden. And there at the end of the war, they found a train that had been backed up into this train tunnel, and it was just pack loaded with some of his stolen art. And then very close to Berchtesgaden, the 101st Airborne set up a spot where they basically set up an art gallery for soldiers to come and kind of tour through and look at all of this art that Goering had amassed for himself. Um, but yeah, he was a man of extreme indulgences. He wanted all the art, he wanted all the food, he wanted all the liquor. Yeah, and
Have you? I know you've done a significant amount of traveling. Have you ever had the opportunity to see Goering's aircraft collection?
No, no, I can't say that
Or
I have.
were you aware of its existence?
No, I not until just this moment.
Oh, so the next time you find yourself overseas again in Poland, I can't remember exactly where. It might be Warsaw, but I might be wrong on it. I know at least country wise, it is in Poland.
Okay.
Um, Hermann Goering, aside from art, one of the things he loved collecting was he actually amassed the largest, well, at that time, I think Peter Jackson now currently holds the record, but he amassed the largest collection of World War One aircraft in private
Really?
hands. So Peter Jackson currently holds that record, but they're mostly reproductions. So if you go to Poland, um, quite a bit of his collection was destroyed, but the largest collection of original World War One aircraft exists in that country, and is because Hermann Goring was, he's like living in the glory days. It's like I was a World War One ace. So if you want to see a fantastic collection of original World War One aircraft, it is the Hermann Goring collection.
I'll be dadgum. That's the first I'd ever heard of that.
Yeah, it's it, and the thing is, just like any part of history, it is amazing how many little things like that kind of just slip by, or you don't really think about.
Yeah.
Because obviously, when we talk about Hermann Goring, we talk about his part, you know, in the Nazi regime and the atrocities that he helped perpetrate. But then there's also these other parts that are like, yeah, he was a terrible person, but at least this one little aspect of him was helpful to, history at least. And I know I want this to be plainly stated. I am not a Hermann Goering fan. Like I said, I was very happy with the portrayal of him being a fat dude. So like, I'm going to shut up now. I
Before you get
not
canceled along with me.
Nazis bad. Okay, that is
All
the
right,
official
good.
position
All
of the
right,
show.
that's all we
Nazis
needed to hear.
bad.
That's all we needed to hear.
This is the qualifier that I have to make in like every single episode that I put on my channel that
Well,
has to do with Nazis.
well, yeah. There is a vast difference between having an interest and you know wanting to learn because it is an interesting topic versus quote unquote liking it.
Yeah.
And that there is a very strong line between those.
Yeah. Yeah, very much so. But not everybody is able to delineate between the two.
Yeah, it's
So
sometimes it's just
it's
easier to yell at
yeah,
each other.
it's a stupid time to be alive.
But I know we've talked about um many different aspects of this film, and there's been some scenes that we've already discussed. Aside from the stuff that we've discussed up to this point, was there any particular scene or moment that really stuck out to either one of you?
So, that scene and the scenes following where he meets and talks with that one French art chick. What was there a reason she was being such a bitch to him? Like, I know the whole stereotype of French people are rude, and I know that she was suspicious of him for because she thought he wanted to take the art all for himself, but that could have just been resolved with a simple no, we're trying to get it back. And he doesn't really do that. He's mysterious about it when they first talk about it.
I think that had to have just been we're feeding into the French stereotypes. I also love the fact that Kate Blanchett is like, "Will you stop speaking French? It's terrible." And it's like, your French is terrible in this movie too.
Yeah, like 3 different French people tell him that.
I love that. Like every time, like you can see the
And
movie is trying to make that attempt. Like, hey, just in case you forgot, we're in France and people speak French here. But then they immediately
which
are like, just speak English. It's easier. It's like, okay, like
which is an interesting cultural note because in a lot of cultures when they hear someone at least trying to speak their language, they're flattered or at the very least endeared by it. But then they offer to speak in English if they know it to make it easier on the person. But no, in France, they'll straight up roast you, apparently.
My
Well,
my experience in France has honestly been quite positive. I know there's that French stereotype, but especially if you get like out into Normandy, man, those have been some of the nicest people and some of the most appreciative
Wow.
of the American contribution during World War II. Yeah, I've not had that experience at all, and I've been to France 5 or 6 times now. And my experience has been positive. Each time I've gone.
I assume there were less Germans than when your grandpa went to France.
Yeah, yeah, probably.
I don't know. Aren't they
Yeah.
all part of the EU now or something? You never know.
Yeah,
But
yeah, yeah. But
so
I mean,
Anyway,
and that that goes
open
for Germany
borders.
too. My experiences in Germany have been excellent. Um,
I know
yeah.
my dad was a active duty Air Force, and one of his favorite countries to visit was Germany. He's probably in the course of his career, he was probably there like 2 dozen times, and he like anytime we took over me and my wife took an overseas trip like a month or two ago, and it was just we went to Mexico for a week, and immediately you could see he's like, man, I wish I could go back to Germany. I'm like, not on the same topic, but I appreciate the enthusiasm, Dad. But I've always had this dream. I'm like, one of these days I'll surprise him with like a Rhine River cruise or something.
yeah. My dad was a rancher. Is a rancher. His father before him.
But JD, was there any other scenes to you that really stuck out?
The one that just pops out in my head, and that I think is probably the best line in the movie. I think is the one that you all just referenced, where Matt Damon comes up to Kate Blanchett's character, and she comments on, he says, please stop speaking French, or whatever it is that you're speaking. And Matt Damon replies, well, if it weren't for us, you would be speaking German. And her reply is, no, if it was not for you, I might be dead, but I would still be speaking French.
Yeah.
I love that line. I love the delivery of it, and I love the spirit of it as well. Um, in the
Very,
United
very
States,
defiant.
yes, there's a defiance to it that I, I think is the best line in the movie. Um, but Americans tend to have, and I've been a part of this too. Um, you know, kind of poking at the French for you know their
Decades.
yeah for their capitulation against the Germans, early in the war. Um, there's a lot of context that's involved there. This is a country that had been devastated by the First World War, um, and it wasn't just France. The German war machine was rolling over everybody, but there was a resistance um, among the French people even throughout the Nazi occupation, and they were very much a part of defeating this evil menace in Europe, right along with the Americans and the British and the Canadians and the Polish, and all of these other groups that they all played a role. And I don't know, I love that line.
No, it was definitely
A good
it's one
line,
of
yes.
it was a good line, and also it's one of the few moments in this film that it's delivered well.
Yeah.
One moment that stuck out to me was when they landed on the beaches of Normandy in this movie,
Hmm.
and I couldn't help but be struck. Like it was irksome to me because you see the equipment like around, like we get we get the Higgins boat dropping them off. We see, crates and trucks around the beach, but it is bar none. If you go back and watch that scene, they are literally the only people on that beach, and it's just frustrating as somebody who like studied history. You would have to know at this time that this is probably one of the busiest beaches or ports in the world at the time,
Yeah.
and like it was just it's like I was complaining in Gettysburg where there's seeing like one of the largest battles in North American history, and we have birds chirping in the background. It's like, why is this scene so empty? Why couldn't we hire like 2 dozen extras just to mill about? Because I think, and I we haven't done Saving Private Ryan yet, but there's a scene in Saving Private Ryan that demonstrates that very well, where it's like a couple of days after the invasion has occurred, and they're on the top of the bluff, and it looks down over the beach, and you just see thousands of ships, and the
Yeah.
beach is just packed with trucks and people and all this stuff, and it's like it's a small thing, but it's like I wanted that in that moment. And granted,
Yeah.
it wouldn't have progressed the story any which way, but it was something that threw me out of the movie for a moment. So
Yeah.
that's
It's one of the many little things that add up to just a little bit of a miss, um, in the big scheme of things.
right.
But
So
still worthy of watching though.
I
absolutely. I
agree.
I think I think the topic alone makes this movie worth watching, even if there are elements that kind of miss the mark or moments that fall flat. I think just the topic is worth making this a watch. And like we talked about earlier, this is a war movie that you can show to your family and can have discussions about the war with your family in kind of an appropriate sense, and it it doesn't detract from the topic.
Yeah, yeah, I would agree. I would agree with that wholeheartedly.
But so I know you brought it up right at the beginning with the thermometer rating, but right about this time or this moment, what we generally do is we come up with a custom rating, we give it a rating, and then we see how it stacks up. We know what the critic rating for this is. At least we still have the audience rating to uh, leave us unswayed, if you will. So, with the knowledge that we know, well, Jack has the exact number for the audience or the audience and critic rating, but I think it's time we come up with our custom rating. Last week with Gettysburg, we did it on a scale of 1 to 5 charges. Um, I'm open to suggestions as to what this week's rating would be, whether it's burnt paintings
I was gonna
or
say a scale of 1 to 5 torched Picassos.
you know what that if that works for everybody else, I think 1 to 5 torch Picassos works for me. So, Jack, would you like to give your rating first?
I'm gonna give it a 2 torched Picassos and 1 medium rare Picasso.
Just singed around the edges.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a
Okay.
great topic, don't get me wrong. I love lost media and art and whatnot, and I felt like this movie was a good marriage between my love of war movies and my passion for lost media and art. But yes, it was not without its shortcomings.
Okay.
No, I will not
JD.
elaborate.
I,
Okay.
I
JD on a
would
scale of 1 to 5 burnt Picassos.
I'd give it a 3. Yeah,
A
it's
3.
worse than the best and better than the rest. But it's worthy of watching just to connect you with some unknown history. It's not unwatchable, but it does have its problems.
Fair enough. For me, I think I'm going to agree with you, JD. I would give this a. I think I might alter it a little bit. I think this is two torched Picassos and then just the frame of a Picasso. So
Ooh.
two and a
Ooh.
half ish.
Brutal.
So the painting got torched, but the frame is fine.
Which, compared to what the Russians said, we can. Oh, the frames are useless. We can replace the frames.
Oh my goodness! I can't believe we never even got around to talking about the Russian aspect of this film.
And
Yeah, which was non-existent so, in real life. That was a non-issue.
Yeah. If you guys don't mind, I would love to take just like 3 to 4 minutes talking about the Russians, because I think it's one of those interesting topics, because I think it's very rarely in a World War II film where we see a transition. Like, obviously it's a bit overplayed in this sense, but I think it's very rarely we see in a World War II film where the enemy is transitioned from the Germans to the Russians, even though, like, at this time they're still our allies, but you can see the writing on the wall that we're
yeah,
gearing up to have them as our enemies in the future. And
yeah, like
I found that element very interesting to be added in there, because it's not something we usually see.
Yeah. So at the end of the movie, they depict that there's this race to get the art out of a place called Altau Sea, which is in Austria. And a lot of people know that in the post-war world, Germany was going to be divided up into four occupation zones between the Soviets, the Americans, the British, and the French. What a lot of people don't know is that Austria was undergoing the same division. It was divided up into four different occupation zones, and just in the same way that Berlin was divided up into four different zones, Vienna was divided up into four different zones. Where Altau Sea is at is nowhere near the Russian zone. It was solidly in the American zone. There was no threat
God damn
of
it.
the Russians, going and taking it over and getting the art. So yeah, that was another thing where it was just kind of like drama for drama's sake that they kind of shoehorned in there.
Yeah, I was even thinking as I watched it, there's no way this happened in real life, and if this did happen in real life, it was nowhere near as close.
Yeah.
Uh, they just wanted that last nail biter.
They did. And I love the fact that the one of the big moments of like deterrence to the Russians was like the worst roadblock in the history of roadblocks. It was like a singular burnt out Jeep on a road.
Frame. Yeah, it was the frame.
They just like flipped it over.
Yeah, they really didn't need 10 people to do that. I could have done that with like four of my friends.
But I will say, again, it's one of those moments that even if in that instance it wasn't true, I think it's an interesting thing just to bring up that, there's so much that goes on in the story of World War II that, we usually kind of divorce the topic of the Cold War and World War II, when in reality, I don't want to say it's a continuation of the same conflict, but in a way, it kind of is.
Yeah.
But we got off topic.
We did.
Rotten Tomatoes rating. So the critics give this 31%, and the audience score is a 44%.
Even the audience wasn't.
Yeah, they
Harsh.
weren't wowed
Grateful.
by this.
I mean, granted, we weren't too much higher than the audience score, but we were still more generous to it.
Yeah. I would give it, if I had to give it a percentage, I would put it in the low 70s.
I think the audience is right on this one, as per usual for me. However, the last episode I kind of sided with the critics on.
I think a good way of framing this movie, at least as a person who consumes it, is I don't know how you guys watched it, but I watched it on Hulu because that's one of the
Same.
places. It's one of the places you can currently stream it. Um, Hulu added Monuments Men to their catalog. I want to say like 2 or 3 months ago. I might be a little off on that, but it's been around for a solid minute on Hulu. And I remember the first day that I saw it on the like suggested for you page of Hulu. I added it to my watch list. You know, the save it for later thing, and I added it to my watch list, and then I never got around to watching it again until it was chosen for this episode. And I think that's kind of indicative of how a lot of people would feel about this film, which is it is worth me adding it to my cart. It's like adding it to my Amazon wishlist cart, but I'm never actually going to buy it.
Yeah.
Um,
Hope that somebody gets it for you for Christmas.
yeah, I'm not going to be mad about it, but I'm not going to go out of my way to get it myself either. You know,
Yeah.
which is it's a shame. It's not a bad movie. It's not a great movie, but
It's a
um,
movie.
it
Of
is.
course, I
Yeah,
say that a lot on this podcast.
you say that almost every episode. It is a movie and it is worth at minimum one watch. I don't know, and I would even say it is worth a rewatch, but I couldn't give you a time frame in which you should rewatch it because my record now is I saw it in theaters and then I waited like 10 years to rewatch it. So it's not a bad movie.
Yeah,
It's worth giving a shot, but
yep.
I wouldn't expect too much from it if you've not seen it before.
Yeah, that's all the thoughts I have on the matter.
Yeah.
So
I'm
at
starting to
this
feel the
time,
wine.
are you?
Hey.
So at this time, love to give you the floor, JD. I know you're a busy guy. Got your fingers in a lot of pots, pies, what have you. Lots of projects. So the floor is yours to give us any and all of your pages, channels, any projects you'd like to push that are coming up, and if you want to uh, push your code for Jocko products again, have at it.
All right, sure. Yeah, so the channel on YouTube is the History Underground, um, and there's basically two primary shows underneath that umbrella. One's History Traveler, going around to different historical sites around the world. Another one is American Artifact, just looking at some of the artifacts of history and how they connect us to the past. So yeah, if you're into history and learning new things and travel and stuff like that, well then yeah, give it a look, and maybe if you watch a few episodes and it uh, you know catches your attention, maybe subscribe. And yeah, got a lot of stuff coming up here in the near future. Going to be diving into some World War I content finally, that I'm pretty excited about. Yeah,
I
and the history and the history 10 is the code if you want to get some discount stuff at Origin or Jocko Fuel.
Sounds good, and can't wait for that World War I content. I know you've done some really great stuff as far as the Normandy videos and your Civil War videos as well.
Thank you.
Were very excellent, and I feel like this was a good episode to have you on with because obviously this was a very object focused movie, and with the videos you do with Eric Dorr, it's very fitting. Um, so yeah, it was great having you on. Uh, for our end of it, we'll plug our stuff for a moment. You can find us on Instagram and Facebook at the Armchair Commanders Podcast. Give us a follow. If you like this episode, give JD a follow. If you like this episode, leave us a review. The stars do matter. Um, what am I? Oh, if you are on YouTube and give JD a follow, also head on over to History Apprentice, which is our YouTube channel where you can find our episodes. I know it doesn't make a lot of sense that our podcast has a different name from our YouTube channel, but that's just the way the cookie crumbles. So deal with it.
Get over
Um,
it.
So, with that being said, it is about time to pick our next film. Jack, it is your turn. What great film are we going to be doing next week?
Shit, I kind of forgot that it was my turn to check. War Horse.
War Horse?
Yes, final answer. World War One content.
You know what? I dig it. It'll be our first World War One film, and I've never seen War Horse, so.
I mean, it was either that or All Quiet on the Western Front, and that's on the list like 3 times for the 3 different versions that were made.
So let me get this straight. Between War Horse and the critically acclaimed or the critically acclaimed or the critically acclaimed version of All Quiet on the Western Front.
2 of them were critically acclaimed. The 70s version wasn't as critically acclaimed. But if I had to pick one version, it would be the 1930 version of All Quiet on the Western Front.
You know what? No judgment. War Horse it is.
No, actually, it's going to be All Quiet on the Western Front, now that I say it out loud. The 1930 version, because I'd rather watch that personally.
I hope my making fun of you didn't sway your choice.
No, I was kind of in the mood to watch either one of those movies.
All right. Fun fact: I've never seen the 1930s version. I've seen the 70s and the recent version of All Quiet.
I think the 30s version is the only. If you're gonna watch one version, make it the 30s version. Personally, what do I know?
Fair enough. Well, with that being said, we've greatly enjoyed having you on, JD.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate it. Yeah, I had fun.
And for everybody who's listened, we've enjoyed having you join us. And until next week, I've been John.
I'm Jack. And you are.
Oh, am I supposed to be saying something right now?
Yeah, you can just say I'm JD.
Okay. I'm JD from History Underground. Sorry.
Yeah, we got you.
Sorry about that.
That's all good. I didn't really prep you for that, so.
Yeah, we really just dropped that on your lap.
I should have done better. I'm sorry.
Oh, shoot.
Bye. Bye.